No, this is Spellbinder with this news article on the raids that happened yesterday and across the country where they were going in and breaking into these protesters' homes. Well, this one protester wasn't anyone to do with any terrorist organization. He's an organizer, and his name is Kelly. And I'll tell you about him in a moment when I start this article by Paul Craig Roberts. It's today's article. It's official. The U.S. is a police state. Believe it or not. I knew that for a while. Now it's just official. On September 24th, James Diz reported on Antiwar.com that the FBI is confirming that this morning they began a number of raids against the homes of anti-war activists in Illinois, Minneapolis, Michigan, and North Carolina, claiming that they are seeking evidence relating to activities concerning the material support of terrorism. That's right, you're a terrorist if you're a protester now. Now we know what Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano meant when she said on September 10th, the old views that if we fight the terrorists abroad, we won't have to fight them here. It's just that, the old view. The new view, Napolitano said, is to counter violent extremism right here at home. Apparently, we are becoming a thorn under their paws and they don't like it. Violent extremism is one of those undefined police state terms that will mean whatever the government wants it to mean. In this morning's FBI foray in the homes of American citizens of conscience, it means anti-war activists whose activities are equated with the material support of terrorism, just as the conservatives equated Vietnam-era anti-war protesters with giving material support to communism. In other words, terrorism and communism are now synonymous at the same term. Anti-war activist Mick Kelly, whose home was raided, sees the FBI raids as harassment to intimidate those who organize war protests. I wonder if Kelly is underestimating the threat. The FBI's own words clearly indicate that the federal police agency and the judges who signed the warrants do not regard anti-war protesters as Americans exercising their constitutional rights, but as unpatriotic elements offering material support to terrorism. Because if you're not with them, then you're against them. That is the government. Material support is another of those undefined police state terms. In this context, the term means that Americans who fail to believe their government's lies and instead protest its policies are supporting their government's declared enemies, and thus are not exercising their civil liberties but committing treason from people who are treason. Isn't that kind of strange? As this initial FBI foray is a softening up move to get the public accustomed to the idea that the real terrorists are their fellow citizens here at home, Kelly will get off this time. But the next time the FBI will find emails on his computer from a terrorist group set up by the CIA, who sets them all up, that will incriminate him under the practices put in place by the Bush and Obama regimes and approved by the corrupt federal judges, protesters who have been compromised by fake terrorist groups can be declared enemy combatants and sent off to Egypt, Poland, or some other corrupt American puppet state, Canada perhaps, to be tortured until confessions is forthcoming, and anti-war protesters and indeed every critic of the U.S. government are on Osama bin Laden's payroll. Just like the union sent those people to protest Bexwell get-together. Yeah, I guess they're terrorists too. So remember, unions are equal to terrorists. Almost every Republican and conservative, and indeed the majority of Americans, will fall for this, only to find later that it is subversive to complain that their Social Security was cut in the interest of war against Iran or some other demonized entity, or that they couldn't have Medicare operation because the wars in Central Asia and South America required the money that could have saved their lives. Or otherwise, if you complain, you're a terrorist. Americans are the most gullible people that ever existed. They tend to support the government instead of the Constitution, and almost every Republican and conservative regards civil liberties as a coding device that encourages criminals and terrorists. That's right. Our Constitution encourages criminals and terrorists. I guess the American people are criminals and terrorists now. Well, I knew that since September 11th, when the Patriot Act 1 and 2 was passed afterwards, that 290 million people became enemies of the state and terrorists. The U.S. media are highly concentrated in violation of the American principle of a diverse and independent media. will lead its support to the witch hunts that will close down all protests and independent thought in the U.S. over the next few years. As the Nazi leader Joseph Goebbels said, think of the press as the great keyboard on which the government can play. An American police state was inevitable once the Americans let their government get away with 9/11. Americans are too gullible, too uneducated, and too journalistic to remain a free people. As another Nazi leader, Hermann Goering, said, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. Tell them they are being attacked, and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and for exposing the country to a danger. This is precisely what the Bush and Obama regimes have done. America, as people of my generation knew it, no longer exists. And then I got this little video that will tell you how they got that way. This is by ISIS Television. Dr. Richard Salter talks conspiracy, and this is the facts.
Inspiring, thank you. Now, I think part of the problem is that there are very high-tech mind control programs that have been going on for a long time that have sort of, what we want to say, hypnotized the human race?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And in fact, some of these mind control programs are not even very high-tech. Certainly technology exists to beam voices into the human brain or to influence human emotions. But look at a garden variety mind control program such as the public school system, which the government mandates people attend by law. If you don't go, you can be cited for being truant. The parents of children who don't attend can be arrested for not sending their children to school. And look what happens when you get to school. First of all, you have the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. You have to salute a piece of cloth hanging on the wall in front of the classroom. Then you learn history and civics. You're taught what is true and what is not. You're taught the government must be obeyed. You're taught there are things called laws that you must comply with. You're taught that you must do what the teacher says for whatever reason, and if you don't do what the teacher says, you will be punished. You are taught that you must sit in one chair and one chair only for hours on end. If you speak out of turn, if you raise your hand, if you need to perform a biological function such as drinking a glass of water, eating, going to the bathroom, you must ask the authority control person who's been put there by the state for permission to perform basic biological functions. So from a young age, we are mind controlled and body controlled by the state, and it starts at the age of 5 or 6 years old and goes on for years and years and years. So that's a real basic form of mind and behavior and body control, mandated by law by the state, and if you don't conform, you are subject to have the police visit your house and arrest your parents.
Recently, there is a story of a couple of Seventh-day Adventists that just forgot or didn't know they had to register the kids about homeschooling. They were in jail for quite a while.
Yes. And then there are other basic mind control programs such as television, which is commonplace in modern society. It is a rare home that does not have a television set. I suppose the Amish don't have televisions, but most everyone else does have at least one TV set in their home. Now, as the English author David Icke has pointed out, television is full of television programs. Now, people wonder, how do we get programmed? Well, by television program. We have sports programming. We have news programs. News programs tell us what is news and what is not news.
And don't you agree that that is a false reality?
Yes, it is. That is disinformation and misinformation. And
owned by the few at the top that control reality.
Yes, major corporations control the major news media outlets, and of course the major corporations are very closely allied with the powerful government agencies. So in the main, these powerful Fortune 500 corporations put on the news programs what the government agencies want to be disseminated to the public, whether it is true or false. And mind you, it is not always true. And if it is true, frequently it is not the whole truth, or it is a partial truth. False, and mind you, it is not always true. And even if it is true, frequently it is not the whole truth, or it is a partial truth, or other more important truths are ignored in whole or in part and go unmentioned completely or largely unmentioned. So you can see that the news programming is very selective and also false to a large degree in many cases. And then we have other programs like soap opera programs. How many women watch these soap opera programs which are full of dysfunctional relations and people of all kinds? Family relationships, families that don't work, violence, lying, cheating, backstabbing, and millions of women. It's a largely female audience for these programs. But these soap operas, and then how many women create dramas in their lives based on, in many cases, mirroring or paralleling what they see in these soap opera programs, which are programming them.
And they wonder why children are so violent, but recently I heard that by the time a high school student is 17 or 18,
yes,
they will have seen 400,000 acts of murder on television.
Yes, and then we wonder how come so many people are superficial in their behavior or their thinking process, and understand that young children are for hours, weekly, daily even in many cases, parked in front of the television and watch cartoons. Now cartoons are exactly that, very cartoonish. They're very simplistic. They're foolish in many cases, oftentimes very violent actually, and the figures in cartoons often don't have very mature character development. They exhibit very immature and childish behavior. So from a young age, children are programmed to have and to think, to behave and to think in a cartoonish manner, because that's what they've seen, and they're programmed for that at the age of 3, 4, 5, 6 years old.
Now, we do have evidence, and even the CIA has admitted to MKUltra.
Yes.
What is your take on what's going on now with technology and mind control compared to?
Well, the alphabet soup agencies such as the CIA, the FBI, and the various military intelligence agencies, the NSA, the National Security Administration, and so forth, these agencies are very heavily involved in mind control and have been for decades. The means to influence the human mind electronically are very advanced and sophisticated. There are patents that have been given for brain transmitters and other electronic technologies that can put thoughts, feelings, and even intelligible speech right into the human mind by remote electronic means. This is not speech right into the human mind by remote electronic means. This is not magic in any way, shape, or form. It is nuts and bolts electronic technology. And this has been with us for most of the post-World War II period. You have to understand that in World War II, when radar technology was still young, that it was observed that the people who worked around radar and operated it and maintained heard sounds in their head when they did so, clicking sounds and other sounds. And it wasn't long until they realized they were hearing the radar. And electronic engineers were then to experiment with different kinds of electronic circuits and oscillators and transmitters, and found out which frequencies and waveforms the human mind was most susceptible to, and then refined the means to put actual thoughts and intelligible voices right into the human brain. This technology is well understood. It's decades old. The population at large, the general public, is not very savvy about this, not very aware of it, but it does exist. And in my writings, I cite some of this technology, including in my most recent book, The Richard Sauter Briefing, and also in one of my other books, The Kundalini Tales.
I have the Richard Sauter Briefing right here, and in this book you mentioned that in Israel, there's security there, and they're contemplating putting mind-reading machines at the airport?
Yeah.
And there you go. That's all the time I have on this time. And if you want to see the rest of this, I'll have a link at the bottom of this video, and also to the Paul Craig Roberts story, and you can read that and watch this. This is about 60 minutes long for the Dr. Richard Sauter talk on ISIS television with Christine Powers Not going to pronounce her last name. Until next time, good day.